Hello, fellow writers. In my last video, I talked about getting the call from my literary agent, which was amazing. And the truth is, if you're lucky enough to get one offer from an agent, you may be lucky enough to get more than one offer from an agent. In my case, I wasn't overflowing with offers. I had 2 offers from agents and I had to choose between the 2 of them, and it was actually a more difficult decision than I expected it to be. So in this video, I'll talk about what it took for me to make that decision when I was choosing between literary agents, and then I'll talk about what it was like to work with my literary agent for the first time, what it's like today, and sort of what that relationship looks like once you have a literary agent and you're working with them on a regular basis. So in order to vet the 2 agents that I was choosing between, the first thing that I did after having phone calls with each of them to hear about their vision of my book and where they thought they wanted to sell it and sort of what they envisioned in my career as well. After those phone calls, I then spoke to their clients. And this was so important and so valuable. So my literary agent, Andrea Somberg, she connected me to 2 of her current clients. One who is a longtime client of hers, Sarah Beth Durst, and one who had just debuted with her first novel that Andrea sold, Chelsea Babulski. Chelsea and Sarah are both awesome writers, and they're also incredibly kind, and they were very generous with their time with me and talking about their experience working with Andrea, and they absolutely raved about her, and so they were really convincing in me making that decision. They also have written awesome books. Sarah writes fantasy novels, which I will link to below. Chelsea writes young adult thrillers. I'll link to both of their books below so you can go and check them out. In addition to speaking to the 2 people who are now kind of my agent sisters, I also spoke to a former client of Andrea's. Now, I made this connection through my online writing communities. I was able to get in touch with an author who used to be represented by Andrea, but is no longer. And that was actually a really incredibly valuable conversation, maybe the most valuable of all, because I got to speak with somebody who was a little more objective, right? They were not currently represented by her. She was not somebody that Andrea connected me to. So I was able to get a real objective perspective of her work with her. And so even though they had decided to split, I still was really reassured by everything I heard from that former client. And so that also really helped me in making the decision. So today I am represented by Andrea. She is an amazing agent. She's incredibly speedy and responsive, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. And I have my book coming out in spring 2021, which she sold, and I just am thrilled to be represented by her. And really the call from Andrea, the call when she said that she wanted to represent me, that moment was like my turning point from when I went to a hobbyist writer to a professional writer. And so just an incredible moment in my experience, and even though that decision of which agent to be represented by was a challenging one, I am incredibly happy with where I landed. Now I am working with Andrea on an ongoing basis. We are business partners. She has essentially invested her time in me as a writer, and we are working together to continue selling my current book and future books as well. So the first thing I did with Andrea was, once we agreed to work together, the first thing I did was we met up for lunch. So we're both based in New York City, and it really means a lot to me to have face-to-face communications. This is why I made this YouTube channel, because I wanted my online friends to get to know me, and I wanted to interact more with the other people and author tubers I was seeing on YouTube. Face-to-face communication is incredibly powerful, and so it meant a lot to me actually to be able to meet up in person with Andrea. Lots of people, I think, will probably speak with their agents by Skype. I actually have not asked around, so actually if you're a represented author, I would love to know how you communicate with your agent, if you would put that in the comments. And if you have ever done like a FaceTime or a Skype so you can get a better sense of them than you might get over a phone call. Or if that doesn't matter to you at all and you're perfectly happy to communicate via email and phone, I would love to know. In my case, we met face to face, we had lunch together. It was a wonderful opportunity to just get to know her on a personal level, get to know her professional background. We talked about my career, we talked about the book, of course, we talked title ideas, because at that time there was a very different title for my novel, and we talked potential future books. I actually shared with Andrea that I am very interested in writing mystery novels. I've talked about this before. Not doing it yet. I have a sort of mental block whenever I try to write a mystery novel, but it really is my dream. So she gave me a lot of really valuable insight into the mystery novel market because she has sold books and been selling books in that market for quite a while. So it was not only was it a nice warm opportunity just to get to know her, but I also got a lot of insight out of it as well and was able to share with her a lot of my thinking about my upcoming books and other things I wanted to be working on. After that, we signed the contract. And we immediately moved into revisions, so into revising my book, Daughters of a Dead Empire. Andrea turned around the manuscript, I believe, in 1 week. It might have been like a week and a half. She's a beast. She's incredibly fast. She turned it around like that with her revisions and her comments throughout the document. I then took a month and a half to do my revisions. I am not as fast as she is, nowhere near as fast. I did stick to the deadline that we had set together, so I am proud of that. And after I sent it back to her, we cleaned up the manuscript a little bit and we went on submission shortly thereafter. I will talk a lot about being on submission in my next video. I'm going to dedicate a whole video to it because it's an intense process. But before we went on sub, Andrea shared with me the list of editors that she was considering pitching in her, or submitting to in the first round. So this was 10 to 15 editors. She shared with me the names of the editors, the imprints, the publishing houses they were a part of, and her reasoning and her rationale for going with one imprint instead of another. So she's incredibly transparent with me about that. Now, in reality, it's really hard to know much about these different editors. As writers, we don't interact with editors at all before we're published, right? Or before we have a book deal. They tend not to have such a heavy online presence because it's not like they're going out there and sort of pitching themselves, trying to get writers to approach them, right? Editors tend not to be as visible online as agents are. However, I still wanted to do my due diligence. So for all of the names that Andrea gave me, I did research as much as I could to make sure that I felt comfortable with each of them. And that's what she wanted me to confirm, that I was happy for her to submit to this list of editors. So I looked up, their names to see which books they came up with, whose acknowledgements they were mentioned in, so I could get a sense of what other books they had published. And wherever I could, I found interviews with these editors just to get a sense of them. And out of like 10 to 15 names that she gave me for that first round, there was one name that I was like, maybe I want to hold off on this one a little bit. I'm not so sure about this one. And the rest of them I was like, yeah, great, let's go ahead. So I appreciate that Andrea gave me that opportunity to do that, and also her transparency in letting me know the entire list of who she was submitting to. Finally, when the offer came from my editor at Macmillan, Andrea, of course, negotiated the contract, negotiated the deal, took care of announcements in like Publishers Marketplace, Publishers Weekly, and so on, and handled all of the businessy conversations with my editor, so I didn't have to worry about that. There have been some surprises in working with a literary agent. One thing I will say is I don't speak with Andrea as much as I think I imagined I would speak with a literary agent before I was represented. I think in my mind I had this dream that I would be like on the phone with this person every couple of weeks and we'd be talking about my career, and every time I had an idea or a thought about my books, I would be talking to them about it. Anytime anything popped into my mind. I am a writer. Writing is an incredibly important part of my life. I would always be talking about writing if I could. Literary agents have lots of clients that they're representing, right? This isn't a one-on-one deal. We're business partners, but I am not her only business partner. So she has a lot of work that she's doing. And in addition, this is her job. It's not her life, the way that writing is my life. So it's not like we're best buddies. It's not like we're writing group partners. We're business partners, and so we talk about business and we talk about pitching. I will say that, as I start thinking about my next book, like agents do really appreciate it if you work with them in talking through, I have these different ideas for potential novels that I might want to write. What do you think might be more marketable? What are you hearing from editors? That kind of conversation. That said, I don't do that. I can't do that. I can't write that way. I am a pantser, and part of that is that I cannot tailor the design of my stories to what might fit the market. So I actually don't do that with Andrea. I don't reach out to her with like different ideas I have for stories to run them by her. I actually, when I am writing a new story, for me, I am most successful when I treat it like a secret garden. This is my story. I am cultivating it privately. I am exploring the world privately on my own. I don't share my pieces of my first draft with anyone. And I don't know if it's going to be any good until I finish that first draft and then reread that first draft. So one thing I did when I first met her during that lunch was I told her about a young adult sci-fi novel that I had just completed writing. I'd spent like 5 months writing it. I was very excited. And she was like, oh yeah, that sounds interesting. And then upon rereading and trying to revise that draft, I realized it was not workable. It was, you know, maybe I could have cleaned it up a little bit and shared it with her, but I was not proud of that book in the state it was in, and I did not have a vision for fixing that book. I kind of feel like I could have disappointed her by doing that. I sort of promised this manuscript that I ultimately was not able to deliver on or did not want to deliver on. And so I am now being a little more cautious. I'm nearly finished with this new draft that I'm working on, and once I see what it looks like, then I will let her know and see if she's interested in submitting this to my editor for my book option. When I send it to Andrea, I will probably write up like a mock query letter. I spent all that time learning how to write a good query letter. I may as well keep using those skills and just, you know, put it to some use. So I'll probably send her like a mock query letter and a synopsis about the book and see what she thinks. So all of that said, those are things that I am kind of wrestling with in my head. I do want to say that a good agent is going to be responsive to you when you reach out to them. So that's something that Andrea is amazing at, that I find incredibly valuable. So no, we're not on the phone every week or every other week, but if I have a question, something that's weighing heavily on my mind, and I reach out to her, she will respond right away. If I ask her to reach out to the publisher about something, she will do it right away. She's incredibly responsive and thoughtful and kind about all of my concerns and the things that I'm learning, and that's what you want from a good literary agent. What are we up to now, since I am kind of working on my own new secret project? Well, I am currently waiting for an edit letter from my editor. We made the book deal back in June. We signed the contract roughly in September. So there's a few months to do that, and now I'm expecting the edit letter in January. So you all probably know this, there's a lot of waiting around. During that time, there isn't much for Andrea and I to be doing together, aside from she was following up on making sure that like my advance payment came through. She of course is continuing to sell my book to UK editors and trying to get a film agent. So she is doing all of that work, but there's not much for us to be doing together. That's it for working with an agent. This is such a crucial relationship. I did want to devote an entire video to this topic. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up below. If you have any questions, put them in the comments. In my next video, I'm going to be talking about all the other key relationships that I've developed during the course of this process. And this is something that surprised me a lot during this journey, so I'm excited to talk about it with all of you. So I hope to see you in that next video.